Hello, Year 7. What we're going to do at the moment, because we are all currently having to work from home, is I'm going to do voiceovers for your history lessons, and you will complete the work. I'm Mr. Fisher, by the way. Mr. Gillis and Mr. Wilson will be emailing their classes, respectively, with this link, and you will send your work to them. However, I am creating the actual resources. So what you need to do is, to start with, can you make sure you have a piece of paper, preferably A4, and then can you write down our title, which is Why Was the Harrying of the North So Bad? So if you make sure you write down that title now, and then can you also write down our keywords, which are harrying, Norman, and Anglo-Scandinavian. And I think it's very, very important that we write down the definition for to harry, which means to attack or raid something. So with that understanding now, our title is, Why was the attack or raid on the North so bad? So just a quick recap of what we did last half-term Year 7. We all learnt how William of Normandy became the King of England with his victory at 1066 at the Battle of Hastings. We've looked at the Battle of Hastings and we've analysed the three factors why the Normans won this battle. We looked at, luck, tactics and mistakes. We've observed Anglo-Saxon attempts at resisting the Normans, and we also looked at how the Normans controlled England, and finally we came to a judgment on if the Bayeux Tapestry could be trusted. We looked at reliability. We have already completed our lesson on our Anglo-Saxon resistance to William, but in today's lesson we're going to focus specifically just on one of these revolts. I'm going to show you on the next slide a scene from a Bayeux Tapestry. I want you to try and work out what is happening in this scene. So here's the scene here. What on earth is happening? So I want you to pause this video here for about 5 seconds and then just think about what is occurring in this source from the Bayeux Tapestry. So hopefully you've all had a go at trying to figure out what's happening in that source. But we've learnt about Edgar the Eightling's revolt in the north of England in 1068. The revolt went nowhere in 1068, but the consequences carried over into 1069, and it's those consequences we're looking at today. This source shows us two Anglo-Saxons. They are this man and this man, and they're burning down the home of a Norman family. And what's really, really important in Year 7 is if we look at who these people are, because they're not Norman knights. This is a Norman woman and her child. That's what's really important. The Anglo-Saxons are now attacking Norman women and Norman children. And naturally, why would William react so badly to this? Because nobody wants to see children being murdered, and the Anglo-Saxons are burning down their homes now. However, now we must ask this question. Why would the Anglo-Saxons in the north start attacking women and children? I'm going to show you two maps on the next slide, and I want you just to think about in your head what they show us. So what are these maps specifically showing us? We have covered these right at the start of Year 7 in like September. The first image, this one, shows us the Danelaw. And if you remember, the Danelaw was part of England that King Alfred the Great gave to the Vikings after the Battle of Edington. And naturally, the Vikings lived there and they set up colonies. Lots of people from Denmark moved to England. And this caused the people in this area to become less English and more of a mix between Anglo-Saxons and Vikings. We call these people the Anglo-Scandinavians. And Yorkshire is the great remnant of the Danelaw, because Yorkshire is named after York, and York comes from the Viking term Jorvik, which was what they called the city of York.
And our second image, this one, this shows us the grand North Sea Empire of King Canute, Canute the Great.
And if you remember, Canute was the person we looked at who tried to make the waves stop. And he conquered England in 1015. So it's only 50 odd years before 1066. So it's quite recent. And these people willingly joined Canute's new empire, his new kingdom, and they very much saw themselves as not English or not of the South. They saw themselves as something different, much more independent. And because of this, they obviously didn't see themselves as the same as people in the South. The Vikings, they were a much more separate, much more independent kingdom. It was only about 100 years before 1066 where the last independent Viking king in 1054 died. And he's got one of the coolest names of a king ever, King Eric Bloodaxe of York. So many in the north are asking this question: why should we listen to the Normans? They only beat the people in the south. We're of the north. We are different. I can't give you this source because obviously we are not here, but I'm going to show you an image on the screen, and I want you to just write down everything you see that's happening. So if you pause the video here now, year 7, I just want you to really look at this source of the harrying of the north and just make a list of everything that's happening here. So for example, if we look here, we have public executions. The Normans are publicly executing Anglo-Saxons. So if we pause the video here, year 7, I want you to write a list of everything that's happening in this source. So hopefully you've all now wrote your list of everything the Normans did during the harrying of the north. You should be writing this on your piece of paper. And what you could do if you've got spaces, could you write this subheading above it? What did the Normans do during the harrying of the north? But there's lots of things there. We've got the public executions. We've got, for example, Norman warbands coming through from the south into the north. They are burning villages, they are burning crops, they are intimidating the local population, they are stealing wealth and gold from the Anglo-Scandinavians. Very, very hostile, very, very negative place. But the harrying of the north, it's not just a very distant idea, it happened quite near to where you live. So I'm sure many of you have heard of the village, the town of Penistone. And Penistone was actually affected by the harrying of the north. Before 1069, Penistone was a thriving farming town, so it had a large population and it was very agricultural based. But by looking at the Domesday Book, don't need to worry about the Domesday Book just yet, year 7, because we're going to look at that in a future lesson. We can actually see the effects of the harrying of the north. In 1086, so 15 years after the harrying, Penistone was described as a waste. That's a very weird way to describe something. So what I want you to do, pause the video quickly here. I want you to write this sentence down in your book or on your piece of paper. Why do you think waste? What do you think waste means? Why would you describe something as waste? I just want you to do one sentence just explaining why would you describe something as a waste? What do we mean when we describe stuff as a waste? And there's so many more stories in the north from the harrying. So anyone who's ever been to York, but my classes, X2 and Y3, will know how much I love talking about York because there's so much history there. But the next time you're in York, look for this crest. It's the Cross of England, St. George's Cross, and it's got 5 lions on it. And this comes from a harrying of the north.
So when William, he was marching towards York to destroy it. York,
It was the ancestral cultural capital of the north.
and the 5 wealthiest people in the north came to meet William on Fulford Road. So if you've ever drove to York, and when you come off the motorway, you go around that roundabout,
And there's that big long road that goes to the city. That's Fulford Road. And the 5 wealthiest people in York, they met William there. They'd heard what William was doing in other parts of the north. He was attacking people, he was burning crops. And obviously they do not want that to happen in York. So they go to William and they offered him all of their wealth, and they bow down to him in the mud of a river, and they are just begging him not to destroy the city. William was really, really impressed with them as he let them live. And he put the 5 lions of York, the 5 wealthiest people in the city, on the crest in their memory. He was so impressed by them.
however, William,
Still wanted to send a message. He came here to do something. So William went and he destroyed the city of York anyway. And he allowed the 5 lions to live. And it was their job to rebuild the city and warn anyone in the future not to cross the Normans. So that's quite a vivid, horrible story.
but what does that tell us about the harrying of the north? So again, can we write this question in our books?
What does that tell us about the harrying of the north? Then I just want you to write one sentence. What does that tell us about the harrying? Was it done to just target the people who attacked the Norman families? Or is it much bigger? Is it aimed at maybe destroying the culture of the north? Is it aimed at destroying the cities? What does it tell us about the harrying?
So pause the video here and write your one sentence answering that question.
Who was Orderic Vitalis? Orderic Vitalis is a really interesting guy.
So Orderic Vitalis was a monk and a historian, and he was writing about the conquest, the Norman conquest, in
1116. This is 50 years after the Norman conquest, so William is long dead at this point. Orderic, he was half Norman and he was half English. This would make him a really reliable source of information on the conquest, because he's got feet in both camps. He understands the Norman perspective, but more importantly, he understands the English, the Anglo-Scandinavian perspective. I'm going to read you now a passage from what he wrote about the harrying of the north, and then I'm going to get you to answer 2 questions on the harrying based on what he says. It's quite eye-opening, really. So first of all, can you write number 1?
And then this question: what examples of the harrying has Orderic wrote about?
So I'm going to start reading it now, so pay attention. The king stopped at nothing to hunt his enemies. He cut down many people, and he destroyed their homes and their land. Nowhere else had he shown such cruelty. This made a real change. To his shame, William made no effort to control his fury, punishing the innocent with the guilty. He ordered that crops and herds, tools and food should be burned to ashes. More than 100,000 people perished of starvation. That's a lot of people now, year 7. The population of England was only probably about 2 million people. So that's like 1 in every 20 people starving to death. That's quite a lot. Back to the source. I have often praised William in this book, but I can now say nothing good about this brutal slaughter. God will punish him. So what examples of the harrying has Orderic wrote about? What I want you to do is just quote directly from the source. What examples is he doing? So pause now and write down as many examples of the harrying that Orderic has wrote about. So pause it now. So we can see here, year 7, he cut down many people and he destroyed their homes and lands. This tells us that William and the Normans killed everyone. You could also have wrote down, he ordered that crops and herds, Tools and food should be burned to ashes. More than 100,000 people perished of starvation. So William destroyed all of the food and the ability to make more food. So they're two really horrific things William did to the north. What I want you to do now, Year 7, is I want you to write this new question. Number 2, how does Orderic describe the harrying? So what language is he using to describe it? Is he praising it? Is he condemning it? What is he doing? So pause here again. Make sure you've got that question. How does Orderic describe the harrying? Wrote down on your piece of paper. And then just provide me 1 or 2 examples of how he's describing the harrying. So pause here and write down your 1 or 2 examples of how Orderic is describing the harrying. Here are 3 examples I have found myself. So nowhere else had he shown such cruelty. So even a Norman, 50 years later, is commenting on how cruel what William did was. Secondly, punishing the innocent with the guilty. That's quite shocking. That is if William doesn't care if these people didn't attack the Norman family. He's still punishing them. And lastly, probably one of the most damning quotes from the time period about William is this last one. I have often praised William in this book, but I can say nothing good about this brutal slaughter. God will punish him. That's such a rich language, and it really tells us that even in the 11th century and the 12th century, people were shocked and disgusted by the harrying of the North. And now lastly, Year 7, can you write this final subheading? Can you explain why the harrying of the North was so bad? What I want you to do now is I want you to write a single PEE paragraph, a point evidence explain paragraph, just explaining to me why the harrying of the North was so bad. So I have here sentence starters and a structure you could use. Obviously, you don't have to use the structure I've wrote down here. You can write it yourself. So point, the harrying of the North was very bad for the north of England. There's our point. Because I don't think there's any way Year 7 you could say it was good for the north. Evidence, the reason why the harrying of the North was very bad for the north of England was because, in what examples could you use? You could maybe say something about how William punished the innocent as well as the guilty. Then your explanation, the reason why this was so bad for the north was because, well, for example, everybody was punished even if they were not guilty. So once you've wrote your PEE paragraph, Year 7, put your pen down because you've finished. What you then need to do, Year 7, is you need to take a photo on a phone or a tablet of your work, and you need to send it to your teacher. So for example, 7x2, 7y3, once you've completed this work, you will then take a picture of it all, and you'll email it to me, Mr. Fisher. Reply to the email that I sent this link on, and that way I can just record the information and just see how we're all doing. If you have any questions about the work, do please contact me. On Wednesday though, so this is specifically to my classes, on Wednesday I will be in school because I'm going to be working with some of the key workers' children's. So I may not respond straight away, but I will respond to you when I get a chance. Hopefully, see you soon, Year 7, and this was the ending of our first recorded lesson. Why was the harrying of the North so bad?